In 1990, a young man found himself alone, struggling to breathe, unaware that his body was about to fail him. What followed was not something he expected, and not something he had words for at the time. This documentary follows what he remembers from the moment his breathing stopped, the experience that followed, and what stayed with him after he returned. In 1990, a young man was living in Northern California, far from where he grew up. In a body that was not used to cold weather, and a life that felt heavier than it should have at his age. He had just returned from a trip to the mountains where he had seen snow for the first time. And he believed the cough he brought back with him was nothing more than a passing illness. He continued working. He ignored the signs. He told himself it would pass. By the time he returned home one evening, the house was empty. His relatives were out. The night had settled in. The weather outside was harsh, and the air in his lungs felt tight and uncooperative, as though breathing had become something that required attention instead of happening on its own. He tried to walk it off. He made it only partway down the block before his strength failed him. Embarrassed by the idea of being seen, he forced himself back inside, aware now that something was seriously wrong, even as part of him resisted admitting it. Later, he would describe this moment as unreal, as though his body and his awareness were no longer fully aligned. Eventually, he lay down in a small spare room, surrounded by familiar objects, waiting for rest that did not come easily. What happened next did not feel like falling asleep. The change did not arrive gradually. It came all at once, through pain, breath, and the sudden sense that the body had reached a limit the mind could no longer ignore. He woke in the middle of the night with a sharp pain in his chest and an overwhelming inability to draw in his next breath. His eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, while his body convulsed against the bed, struggling to do what had always come naturally. The pain was intense, then suddenly distant, as though something had been released to soften it. Sound remained. Sensation faded. Then there was stillness. He became aware that he was no longer inside the struggle. The room was quiet, unchanged in shape, but altered in quality. Everything he owned seemed to carry a faint glow, tinted blue and green, as if light were passing through it instead of resting on it. Where he moved, the glow followed, marking the floor and surfaces with traces of his presence. For a moment, he was distracted by this. Curious. Detached. Only later did he realize that the body was still on the bed. Experiences like this are often dismissed before they're fully heard. This channel exists to document them carefully. Subscribe if you want to continue with stories like this. Meanwhile, he moved toward the bedroom door, expecting it to open the way it always had. When he reached for it, his hand passed through the surface without resistance, as if the door were no longer solid. The sensation startled him. It was not painful, but it was unmistakable. Whatever state he was in now did not follow the same rules as before. Beyond the door, he sensed others. Not clearly, and not visually, but as a heavy emotional presence. The feeling was dense, sorrowful, and unsettling, as though the space beyond the room held something he was not meant to enter yet. He pulled back instinctively, retreating into the familiar shape of the room. The storm outside was still active. Branches struck the window again and again, driven by wind. He watched them for a moment, grounded by the repetition of motion, by the reminder that the physical world was still there, continuing without him. He considered returning to his body. The thought felt distant, almost theoretical, as though the option had already begun to close. Above him, the single light bulb he had left on earlier started to change. It grew brighter, not suddenly, but steadily, filling the upper part of the room with an intensity that did not hurt his eyes. The light did not flicker or pulse. It expanded with purpose, as though it were opening rather than illuminating. He understood, without being told, that this was not ordinary light. He moved toward it. The transition was immediate and forceful, faster than any physical motion he had known. There was no sense of direction, only acceleration, as though he were being drawn through space without a body to slow him down. At the same time, his awareness widened. His life unfolded, not as memories recalled one by one, but as a complete sequence experienced all at once. From before birth to the moment he had just left, every event appeared with clarity. The movement of this review was overwhelming in its speed, yet precise in its detail. Each moment carried not only what had happened, but how it had affected others. There was no external judgment. He was the one who felt the weight of each action. Small moments carried as much presence as large ones. Kindness, cruelty, indifference, care, all of it was visible, all of it known. The final image that remained with him was of his wife and his 2 young children, still very small, still dependent. Then the movement stopped. What replaced it did not feel calm. It felt unstable. The place he arrived in did not feel welcoming. There was ground beneath him, but it did not feel stable. The surface shifted subtly, as if it were under pressure from something below. The air carried weight, thick and unsettled, and the sky above him was in constant motion. Dark clouds moved in overlapping layers, folding into one another, lit from within by distant flashes that did not behave like ordinary lightning. This was not a silent place. The sound was low and continuous, like wind moving through a vast open space, mixed with something deeper, something that felt closer to vibration than noise. When he tried to speak, his voice did not behave normally. Each thought he expressed outward echoed forward, then returned from behind him, circling back into his awareness. The effect was disorienting, as though the environment itself were reflecting him back to himself. The land around him was broken. Large vents opened in the ground at irregular intervals, releasing bursts of steam and heat without warning. Some were small, barely noticeable until they erupted. Others were wide and deep, their edges glowing faintly as if something below was active and restless. The heat did not burn him, but it was intense enough to make the space feel dangerous. From time to time, shapes appeared within the steam. At first, they were indistinct, movement without clear form. As they came closer, he became aware that these were not part of the landscape itself, but presences moving through it. They drifted rather than walked, emerging briefly before dissolving again into the haze. Their movements were slow, uncertain, as if they were searching for something they could not locate. The feeling here was not calm. It was unsettled, heavy, charged with confusion. He understood, without being told, that this place reflected something about the state he had arrived in. The anger he had carried in life, the resentment, the unresolved conflict he felt toward God and toward himself, all seemed to have weight here. The environment did not accuse him, but it did not comfort him either. It simply existed in a way that mirrored his inner state. One of the figures moved closer. It emerged from a nearby vent, carried upward by steam before settling into a shape that resembled a woman. Her clothing appeared old and worn, torn in places, and covered in dirt. Below her waist, her form did not fully resolve. She hovered rather than stood, her movement slow and deliberate. As she approached, fear rose sharply. She did not speak. She did not announce herself. Her presence alone was enough to signal danger. When she came within reach, he attempted to communicate, asking where this place was, asking who she was. She did not respond. Instead, she moved closer. When she reached him, she pulled back the covering that hid her face. What looked back at him was not human. Bone where flesh should have been. An open jaw widened unnaturally. Before he could react, she lunged. The impact was immediate. Pain tore through him with an intensity far beyond anything he had known in physical life. It was not localized. It spread through his awareness, overwhelming and absolute. As she circled back to strike again, he dropped to his knees, not out of calculation, but instinct. He called out, not with words chosen carefully, but with urgency. He cried out to God, asking for forgiveness, asking to be taken away from this place, asking to be allowed to return home. The moment he did, something changed. The figure recoiled. She clutched her head, as if struck by something unseen, and dissolved back into the vent from which she had emerged. The other presences around him reacted the same way, retreating, fading, withdrawing into the ground and the steam. The echo of his voice stopped. When he spoke again, his words no longer returned to him. Instead, his call moved outward, toward the horizon, carrying only one name. Where the sound traveled, light followed. At the far edge of the landscape, something began to rise. The light did not rush in. It appeared first as a distant glow along the horizon, faint but steady, cutting through the chaos of the sky without competing with it. Where the storm clouds churned and folded in on themselves, the light moved differently. It did not flicker. It did not pulse. It expanded with certainty, as if nothing in the landscape could prevent it from arriving. As it grew closer, the environment began to change. The violent motion in the sky slowed. The heavy clouds pulled back, not torn away, but receding as though making space for something they could not remain in front of. The sound that had filled the air softened. The deep vibration beneath the ground eased, losing its pressure. The light rose higher, clearing the line of the distant mountains. It reminded him of a sunrise, though brighter and more complete than any sunrise he had seen in life. It carried warmth, not just as sensation, but as presence. The fear he had been holding loosened without effort. Love reached him before the light itself did. It moved through him, not as emotion that surged and faded, but as something steady and stabilizing. His awareness felt restored, strengthened, as though what had been scattered by fear and pain was being gathered back together. As the light spread across the land, the ground responded. Where there had been broken surfaces and vents releasing steam, the earth began to shift in a different way. Cracks closed. It subsided. From the soil, new growth appeared. Grass emerged first, then larger forms, unfolding rapidly but without chaos. Trees rose, their movement smooth and deliberate, filling the space with structure and balance. Water followed. Openings in the land released streams that flowed outward, forming waterfalls that moved with clarity instead of force. The storm above continued to dissolve, replaced by open sky. Birds appeared, filling the air with motion that felt purposeful and calm. Other forms of life followed, emerging from the newly formed forest, not startled, not wary, but present. The place no longer felt hostile. It felt alive. At the center of the light, he sensed a presence. Not defined by shape, not limited by outline. He understood who it was without needing confirmation. The recognition was immediate and complete. He felt himself held, surrounded by warmth and attention that carried no condition or demand. Time lost relevance. In that presence, there was no urgency. No need to move forward or back. The peace he felt was deep enough that it erased the memory of the storm entirely. He wept, not from sorrow, but from relief and joy that had nowhere else to go. For a time, he remained there. How long that time was did not matter. Eventually, a different awareness surfaced. Not fear. Not resistance. A simple understanding that the moment could not continue indefinitely. He asked to stay. The response came gently, without judgment. His time was not complete. There was more to learn, more to live. The light began to intensify. It grew brighter, filling his awareness until it washed out all detail, all form. The embrace did not end abruptly, but it did begin to release. The sensation shifted from stillness to movement. Then, suddenly, there was impact. He was back in his body. The return did not feel gentle. It felt abrupt, compressed, and heavy, as though awareness had been forced back into a space that was suddenly too small to hold it. Sensation arrived all at once. Weight. Pressure. The unfamiliar resistance of a body that no longer felt natural. Breath came first. His lungs pulled in air sharply, as if they had been waiting for permission to work again. The movement startled him. His chest rose and fell without effort now, clear and open in a way it had not been hours earlier. He lay still, listening, testing whether the pain would return. It did not. What came instead was confusion. He became aware of the room slowly. The walls. The floor. The small space he had chosen because it felt safe and familiar. The glow he had seen before was gone. Objects were solid again. Ordinary. Silent. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a quiet that felt almost unreal. He sat up carefully. The body felt foreign, like something he had stepped back into without fully remembering how to wear it. He checked himself the way someone might after an accident, paying attention to small details. Movement worked. Breath worked. Nothing felt broken. That alone did not make sense. Then his mind began to catch up. He tried to reason through what had happened, reaching for explanations that felt safe and familiar. He wondered if the experience had been caused by drugs, exhaustion, or imagination. He questioned whether he had lost consciousness and dreamed the rest. The doubt felt necessary, almost automatic, like a shield against something too large to accept all at once. He stood and walked through the house. Clothing lay scattered in places he did not remember leaving it. His jacket. His gloves. Signs of movement that suggested struggle rather than sleep. When he checked the phone, it was still set to dial emergency services. The operator on the other end was not pleased. None of it matched the idea of a dream. As the night faded into morning, he waited. He sat quietly, leaning against the wall, watching the light change. When the sun finally rose, the sky filled with color he had never noticed so clearly before. Pink. Gold. Soft layers that seemed to hold meaning without explanation. It was one of the most beautiful mornings he had ever seen. In the days that followed, life resumed. He returned to routine, to responsibility, to the familiar shape of his days. From the outside, nothing about him appeared dramatically different. There were no visible signs that anything extraordinary had happened. Inside, however, everything had shifted. He carried the experience with him quietly, unsure how to speak about it, unsure who would understand. At times, he questioned his own memory of it. At other moments, the clarity returned so strongly that doubt felt impossible. What stayed with him most was not the fear. It was the light. It was the sense of being known completely, without judgment, without condition. It was the understanding that whatever that place was, it was not distant or unreachable. It existed alongside life, close enough to be entered without warning, close enough to change the way he moved through the world afterward. Even years later, when life felt heavy again, he found himself returning to simple moments. Watching the sunrise. Standing still long enough to breathe. Remembering that whatever waited beyond this life was not empty or hostile, but alive in ways he still struggled to put into words. The experience did not give him answers. It gave him orientation. And that, more than anything else, was what stayed. David's experience does not stand alone. Across different places, different decades, and different lives, people describe moments where ordinary life is interrupted, where awareness shifts, and where something is encountered that does not fit neatly into language, belief, or certainty. Some describe light. Some describe fear. Some describe peace. Others return with questions that never fully settle. These accounts do not agree on everything. What they share is the sense that consciousness does not behave the way we assume it does, and that the boundary between life and death may be thinner, quieter, and closer than it appears. This channel does not attempt to explain what these moments mean, where they come from, or what they prove. It documents what people remember, how they describe it, and what follows when they return. David went on living his life. He carried what he experienced quietly, without turning it into a lesson or a warning. Like many others, he learned that some moments are not meant to be resolved, only lived with. Somewhere else, in another place that looks ordinary from the outside, another life is already moving toward its own interruption. And when it happens, the story will sound different. But the question it leaves behind may feel familiar. These accounts are not presented as proof or doctrine. They are records of interruption. If you want to continue with future stories like this, subscribe to our channel.